Hell of a thing, this conflict between Cereus and Limnic is. The more powerful one grows, the more stubborn the other becomes. Then round and round we go.
You know, when you tell people you're writing a book, that's probably the first question that they ask you. What is it about? What is it about? Everybody wants to know, what's it about? And I think it's a challenging question to answer because, I guess anybody who's created anything or painted anything or directed a movie or written a novel has run into this issue. And obviously, this is the first time I started running into that issue after I started writing the novel and then completed it, is what do I say? Because there's so many things that I want to say that I'm like, man, there's action, there's suspense, there's mystery, there's a little bit of romance in there, but that's not what it's about. I'm not, and different people want to hear different things when they ask what it's about. Of course, I have my elevator pitch. I have the quick summary, which is, it's about two organizations. One's trying to protect the planet and people. The other is a terrorist group fighting against them. That's the quick answer. That's the answer I give most of the time, because the book is titled Cereus and Limnic, and people, while they don't know what that is, of course, when I tell them what the title is, they immediately go, oh, okay, those are the two organizations, most likely. But that's, I really don't like giving that answer. I really don't like it, because there's so much more I want to say about what it is. And I know that if I had half an hour or an hour or something to sit down and take the person out to coffee, and they had half an hour and they were interested, they would probably be much more satisfied with the real answer. I think it's like that for anything, like movies and such, and any type of entertainment, especially when you're the creator, when you're the author. For as long as I can remember, I've been fascinated by a good perspective story. What do I mean by perspective story? You probably don't know what I mean by that. When I say perspective story, I'm sure there's some literary term for it or whatever, but essentially it's a story in which there's a central concept, there's a central object, there's a central place that's throughout the narrative, and there's these different characters, and they're all looking at the same thing, whatever it is, but they see it in a different way. Something like Lord of the Rings comes to mind. Even though everybody knows, it's the magical ring and everybody wants it for power. Of course, they want it for different reasons for power, but Lord of the Rings, it's not really what I'm talking about, but that's the first thing that popped in my head right while I'm sitting here. So essentially, that's the type of novel that I've written with Cereus Limnic. Imagine three people witnessing a live demolition of an old building, standing at different vantage points in the city as they watch it crumble to the ground. They watch it explode. They watch it fall. The three are unaware of each other. They're all at different places in town. They also share little in common with each other than the fact that they're watching the same building be demolished. Additionally, all three are different ages. They have different cultural roots, and they have vastly different life experiences. And then after the building falls and the dust settles, each person recalls that the building wasn't just any old building. It wasn't just any old abandoned structure. Turns out that the building meant a lot more to each of them in a very unique way. And more importantly, there were people inside when it fell down. People that each of the three people witnessing the demolition knew personally. Now, how would those three people feel? Would they try and rebuild? Would they grieve the loss? Would they get angry at the people who destroyed the building? Would they try to rush into the wreckage and the remains and help the deceased? Given their differing perspectives, how would they interact if they actually met each other? I know it's kind of cryptic, but essentially the above scenario, that's what this book is about, and much more. So the short answer to what this book is about, it's about the conflict between Cereus and Limnic. The long answer is it's about people. It's about how the conflict between these two organizations affects the lives of different people wrapped up in it. Of course, the three characters are involved in some way in both organizations. And of course, there's a ton of supporting characters that are involved as well. Some are just bystanders. Some are directly involved with the organization, like they're keeping it up or they're benefiting from what the organization does. And the majority of the novel follows these three characters. And as the characters peacefully, they're living their lives at the beginning of the book, and then all of a sudden, some major event happens, and then boom, the book kicks off, and they're forced to tackle their issues and eventually, possibly, deal with each other in the process. Now, I know I'm being kind of vague with you're looking at me like I'm crazy, like you're not telling me really anything. Well, there's of course there's reasons why. Of course, I don't want to spoil the book. The first reason is obviously I want people to read the book. I want them to enjoy the book. You wouldn't want major spoilers coming out about some type of series coming out on Amazon or Netflix, or a new movie. I'm not going to do that with this book. The second reason is there's actually a lot of mystery in the narrative. When I think about the mystery genre, I think of titles by authors like Agatha Christie or James Patterson or Stephen King. Those come to mind. Maybe it's just me, But I'll be honest, I did not intend to write a mystery novel. Turns out, and I found out that this is just kind of my writing style. I kind of like this writing style where you assume that the reader has some investment in the story. Hopefully they buy in, and then they just naturally want to know more about these characters and about the world. So I don't present everything up front. I had an early draft of the novel, and I had a friend read it, and he called it the breadcrumb method. I'm pretty sure that's not what it's really called, but that's what he called it. The describing how I just give little details about plot points or characters or scenarios before eventually revealing all of the details to the reader. He's a scientist, so he prefers things to be like straight and to the point and no nonsense. But turns out the description fit my writing style. The bottom line is, even though I personally wouldn't categorize Cereus Limnic as a mystery at heart, I think a lot of readers might, and that's cool with me. So what would I label it as? I would label it as a sci-fi social commentary adventure story with mystery and fantasy elements. Is that too much? Is that going too hard? I don't think I'll be putting that on the back cover. I won't put that description, but it should give you a sense about some of the different elements that are contained within the novel. So in addition to the perspectives of the three main characters, there's two distinct world perspectives in the story. One is the perspective that most of us are familiar with today, in modern civilization. It's the capitalist economy, there's tourism, politics, internet culture, all the things operate by the same rules that we pretty much anyone alive today would recognize. And then there's a second perspective. It's the world viewed from the vantage point of someone involved with these two organizations. And most of the novel is written from the second perspective. And in modern social culture, I feel like there's a collective enamorment for some reason with dystopian literature and narratives. I'm not really sure what that is, but I think a lot of people listening know it's a thing, right? It's real, and you've seen it, in the past with a a lot of popular stuff that was popular, not necessarily now. I feel like, thankfully, I was never a big fan of the zombie narrative, The Walking Dead, I just kind of got tired of it pretty quick. But yeah, I feel like the dystopian label is alive and well. And when I think about this, I think maybe it's because a lot of people online and the media, they like to mention that we're living in some dystopian nightmare, based on everything going on. As I'm recording this, there's smoke in the air where I live at in California. There's hundreds of fires raging throughout the state. It's been record heat waves, and that's just one thing, right? There's a ton of other things. There's still the bugaboos of climate change and homelessness and societal inequality, all that stuff that's still there. But I feel like a lot of people like to sum this up and be like, oh, we're living it now. I feel like not a week goes by that I don't hear a mention of Orwell's 1984 in some context, whether it's in media or just some YouTube video or something like that. It's pretty amazing. So that's taking kind of dystopian literature and narratives and taking it to the pop culture mainstream, right? And I mentioned earlier, previous popularity like The Hunger Games, Walking Dead, Handmaid's Tale. There's all these stories that are like, man, look how messed up things are, and look how bad things could become, in this fictional world. And those are good stories. But I think it's kind of a disturbing thought when I think about it. The fact that so many people are eager and like seeking entertainment about whether it's a fantasy or not, about a world in which the world that we know is collapsed or destroyed or non-existent due to some natural event or due to events caused by us, by human beings. I don't know if that's a good look for society. It's like a lot of people feel this way. That's why the stories are popular. That's why the movies and the shows are popular, because it's not like people are like, oh man, my town and city is destroyed in this. Everyone I know and love is dead. Everything I know is gone in this show. Cool, I want to watch it. I don't think people think that. I think they're genuinely curious, and a part of them is like fearing that this could happen in some way. And if so many people are that far gone that, and I'm not saying they're far gone, right? Because I enjoy these stories occasionally too. But I mean, the fact that there's so many people and that they've been so popular for so long says something about our collective consciousness, about how we see things. And a lot of people see things as messed up, and so they flock to these stories. And anyway, I think it feels like nowadays that any story that portrays society as we know it, in a state of disarray or decay, or just as messed up as it naturally is, due to some of the stuff that I just mentioned and other things, it could be labeled as a dystopian. And I thought about that with Cereus Limnic, and I was like, man, this dystopian label nowadays has such a pop culture-ish vibe. And I think it has this, it's been, I'll use the term appropriated by a lot of stories, and just to tell an interesting story, because it's an interesting backdrop, right? It's better than just, hey, your regular plain neighborhood or your plain town or whatever, because it's different, and you can kind of insert your global disaster and then put your protagonist and have your bad guy in, and it's a bread and butter formula that has been used a lot. But that wasn't really my goal in Cereus Limnic, and I think that's why I don't really like the dystopian label. My goal was just to display certain parts of our culture that are in desperate need of repair, and ones that I think we should seriously consider addressing before they become a potential issue. Because the story does take place in, it's not the very far future, but it is in the future. So there's issues dealing with data, there's issues dealing with artificial intelligence, there's issues dealing with evolution. So these are things that I feel like we need to address that. A lot of people in the mainstream, in the mainstream consciousness don't really think about that very soon are going to become relevant issues. So does that make it a dystopian story? I don't think so, but ultimately I aim to leave the readers with ideas for the future. And those ideas may help prevent our society from truly transforming into a dystopian nightmare.
Subscribe or follow the Cereus Limnic podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. For more information about Cereus Limnic, visit keithhayden.net and subscribe, or follow @kh_author on Twitter.